All right. Well, then this is, I don't even know what number this is, but this is Free Weekly Mastermind weekly call. You can join us at freeweeklymastermind.com. And right now I have the recordings posted in case you missed this call or any other call at lettersfromdan.com. I believe there is a link at the top for Free Weekly Mastermind recordings. We'll probably move that to that webinar page that you signed up at to get to this, but I haven't done that yet. You know, baby steps. So anyway, Glenn Sewell from Ohio, who's thinking about moving to Nashville, asked us if we would talk about modifying CSS files in WordPress, which I believe would be incredibly useful to me if I knew what that meant or how to do it. But I don't exactly know. So I thought Michael Schultz of Impress UI, formerly of Sharp Pixel Designs, the NAMS guy in the back who's running the show, would be a good guy to bring on and discuss how this works. So just to make this intro short, here's Michael Schultz.
Hey guys. Thank you, Dan Morris. I appreciate that.
Oh yeah.
And today I'm just going to show you guys some basic CSS examples on how to use it, how to apply it in your WordPress themes, and things like that. I'm not going to go into anything too deep. Advanced CSS tactics or advanced CSS 3 is just coming out here. I'm not going to go into any of that. This is very basic level stuff, so hopefully as easy to understand as possible.
And everyone's everyone's unmuted, so if you have a question, I guess I would just ask it.
Oh yeah, speak up if you guys have any questions at all. I'd be more than willing to answer anything you got. Now I'm actually pulling up an example site here, and hopefully I can have this up in a second. And I'll pull it out in front of the screen here in a moment. Okay, excellent. This should look familiar to you guys.
Wait, where's
there it is. This is, I hope you all can see this. Speak up if you can.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. This is the latest version of WordPress. This is the default theme that comes with WordPress. And I wanted to see if I could just go into the CSS and change a couple of things and show you guys how to do that, just so that you can be a little bit more brave with your theme layouts. Okay. The first thing we do is we go into our back end, and just so that we're all familiar with where to go, I'm just going to go to my dashboard here. And obviously your URL is going to be whatever your WordPress installation is, /wp-admin. If you guys are in this class, you should probably be familiar with A, what WP-admin is, B, what WordPress is, and C, what some basic HTML, because CSS is basically useless without a basic knowledge of HTML. Okay?
All right.
So starting from the top here, we have, and just looking right off the bat, I can see as a designer that this is probably an H1 tag in your HTML. And then you've got your subtitle here. You've got an image positioned, centered, and then you've got your navigation bar here on the bottom, which we could spruce that up a bit. And then we have our post area, and then we have our sidebar, our footer. All right. Now, one tool, and you guys might want to take some notes on this particular part here. I use a very special tool, and some of you may have heard of it. It's called Firebug. Okay, and I'll go ahead and pull that up for you guys. Firebug. Just pull it up on Google. I think it's getfirebug.com. And this is a browser add-on, more specifically a Firefox browser add-on. And if you guys aren't using Firefox, definitely look into that. I've been using Firefox for several years and have been happy with it. So Firebug is actually cross-platform, so you can use it on a Mac and you can use it on a PC as well. And what this basically does is it allows you to look through websites. And this is just the overview. Just allows you to look through websites and see it from a designer standpoint. Look at the different tags, be able to change tags directly on the site and see your results instantly, and also be able to edit the CSS right on the page as well. And this doesn't mean that when you edit the CSS in the HTML within the dialog box that you're going to pull up for Firebug. This doesn't mean that you're going to change it on the site like it's going to be a live change. What it does is it allows you to easily tweak things so that you can know what styles to apply in the actual sheet. And to make it less confusing, let me just go ahead and demonstrate to you what it does. You see this Firebug page here, and you can install Firebug by clicking this red button here. But what I'm actually going to do is show you what Firebug can do. I do not own this web page. I have no access to the code behind this page, but I do have access to the style sheet, the public access style sheet, which means that I can look at their code. What Firebug lets you do is look through the code and actually tweak it on the page without actually changing the live code. So just for demonstration purposes, I can right-click something, and when I install the add-on, it adds a new option to my right-click menu that says Inspect Element. So I click Inspect Element, and I can see my HTML on the left panel here, and I can see my CSS on the right panel here. And this is a selective dialog box here, so when you click something like this div with the ID logo install, the CSS on the right will change to that value so that you don't have to scroll through all the thousands of lines of CSS to find your specific value. All you have to do is click the HTML tag, and the corresponding CSS will appear on the right dialog.
Okay, wait. Let me ask you a question.
So just for
So if you just clicked on Firebug, the header, right?
Yes.
So is that the header, the purple, the blue, and the yellow?
Okay, the header itself is the blue. The purple on the top is margin, and the yellow on the bottom is padding.
Okay.
And you can get familiar with what the different color codes are. But basically anything selected in blue is the actual element, where green and yellow would be padding or margin.
So if it's right now we see purple, blue, and yellow. What are we looking at down below that corresponds to the purple, blue, and yellow?
Look, you seeing down below?
Yeah. In the bottom half, what corresponds to the blue?
I'm not actually sure what you're asking.
Okay.
I mean, because we have the blue that's overlaying the Firebug Web Development Evolved.
Yep.
That's the selected element.
Oh, that's
and
the
then below
select
that
element.
is the yellow.
Okay.
Yes. The blue is the selected element.
All right.
So if I was to actually take that element and in this dialog box hit delete element, the entire header would disappear. You see that?
Oh.
And then let's say I wanted to make this bug disappear. All I'd have to do is hit inspect element, right click it, and press delete element, and it's gone. Now, what's important?
Yeah.
What's important to note in this particular example is that once again it is not. So.
You there, Mike?
So when I yes.
Okay.
When I refresh the page, all of the code that I removed will come back because I did not edit the actual site. What Firebug allows me to do is go through the site with a fine-tooth comb and realize what elements are doing what where, which is much better than, let me make this dialog box go away, it's much better than me right-clicking the page and clicking View Page Source as we normally would,
Yep.
and combing through the HTML and trying to figure out which elements I want. You know, okay, div ID install, and then I have to go all the way up again. I have to click the style, the screen.css with style.css. I'd have to go in there. I'd have to go into the import URL, and I'd have to go find that install element. And that would be mundane and really inconvenient. So Firebug has really essentially made life more convenient for developers. Moving on here, once you have that installed, and I'm going to be using that pretty prominently through here, you don't have to have Firebug to be a CSS editor. However, it is very convenient for picking out which tags are the right tags to edit. All right. Any questions so far?
Hold on a second. I'm going to unmute everyone for a second to see if they have questions. It got noisy for... All right, now everyone's unmuted if you have a question.
Hi, does Paul have a question?
All right, Paul has a question.
When you're selecting, are you selecting from within the Firebug code, or are you selecting it in on the page up top?
Did you hear that, Mike? Mike, did you hear that?
Aha, there we go. Yes, I got that. I was muted. When I select an element, typically on a page, I'm looking for a very specific element. All right. So, for instance, I see the CSS class example title here, and I want to change that. I don't want to change anything else. So, what Firebug allows me to do is just right-click that element, whatever element that is, put my cursor over that element, right-click it, and press Inspect Element. And so, what Firebug will automatically do is it will zone into that element and tell me the properties of that element. Okay, so just giving you an example here, let me make this dialog box bigger. When I clicked Inspect Element, I got the header div, I got the masthead div, and then it zoomed in all the way to the actual text. So you can see CSS class example here, and what I'll do is I'll change that to changed, and you can see how I changed that here. Now, the reason I do love Firebug is I want to change the color. I want to make it italicized. I want to make it look cool, you know. So what I can do is, since I know this is an H1, I find the H1 tag, and I can click that H1 tag. All right. And what clicking that H1 tag within this dialog box does, so you understand the process. You click the element, and then you bring up the H1 tag, then you click the H1 tag. And then on the right side, you can see where that H1 tag is pulling the ID of site title in the CSS. So we have, in that actual title here, we have all of these different CSS attributes. And it may look daunting, but we'll go through it very quickly here in a second. But does that answer your question?
Yep, that's perfect. Thanks.
Okay, wait a second, Mike.
So I definitely recommend that you guys, sorry.
I got a question. So the CSS on the right is like the instructions for the code, and the code is just pointing to the CSS file?
Yes, the code pulls in the CSS file as an external file to style the attributes within the HTML.
So in this case, the word changed, which you just changed, it says this is an H1 tag, which means it's a bold tag, a big one. And then the ID, which is basically saying after you know it's an H1 tag, you need to go to the CSS file and look for the instructions called site title to tell us what to do with it?
Yes, exactly. And I know I kind of dived into it a little bit quickly here, but I want to clarify some points. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and CSS, before the web began, or as I like to call it, before the sophisticated web began, we had to create, let's say we wanted a 20-page website. We would have to go and create HTML for each page, right? We would have, page 1.html, page 2.html, and each page would have their individual page, main column, sidebar, sidebar links. You'd have, 20, 25 links in the sidebar. And what ended up happening was when you wanted to add or remove a link or add or remove a picture on the sidebar or one of the staple elements that are on every page, so like the sidebar appears on every page, but it's hard-coded into every one of those HTML pages. So if I wanted to add, a specific style to the sidebar, like let's say I wanted to change all of my links from black to red, I would have to go through every single one of those HTML files and change the font from font color equals black to font color equals red in HTML on every single one of those files. which is inconvenient to say the least, especially if you have a 20, 25-page website. So has anybody else experienced that, having to comb through several HTML files to change, one sidebar?
Yeah, I don't do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Masuda has a question.
Sure.
Hi, Darren. Hi, Mike. What you just showed us, it seems like this would affect the entire theme, right? My question is, the other day I was writing a blog. You know how you can go in and write your blog in the WordPress editor?
Yes.
I wanted to change the look of, like, I have my theme allows me to use certain types of fonts and colors. I wanted to change it for just one specific post. And when I tried to change it in the HTML view, I only know basic HTML, so I was using that old-fashioned font equals whatever, and apparently all of that is obsolete now. It wasn't taking it. So I was wondering, how can you change something specifically for one or two posts? I don't want everything to change, but just for certain posts.
Okay. Well, that's a very good question, because like you said, many elements are becoming deprecated now.
Yeah.
Like the blinking text, the marquee text, the font color, font size in HTML. It's also becoming deprecated. Mainly because CSS has pretty much taken over the styling of your web pages. You are no longer styling with HTML because you're only laying things out with HTML. So you lay out different blocks, and then you style those blocks with the CSS. So to change a specific page, what I'm going to do for the sake of example is I'm going to create a new page, and I'm going to change the text for you just to demonstrate how to do that. Okay. So here we have our home page, and we have Hello World. We have the blog. This is actually our blog feed, and then we have sample page. We have a whole bunch of text here, which I'm actually going to go ahead and copy all of this. And you can go into our back end and go ahead and create a new page. And we're going to call this sample page styled as opposed to sample page, just to give you a clear idea of what we're doing.
Now, does the text look like it does by default because of the current CSS sheet?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, that's important to note. Typically speaking, you're going to start with a very basic CSS sheet. It'll come with basic styling such as your font family, which would be maybe Arial or Georgia or Times New Roman or whatever your font preference is. And then you've got your font colors, and then you've got your H1 tag sizes. A lot of people like to predefine their H1, H2, H3, H4, H5 tag styles right within the style sheet right off the bat. Now me, when I start designing, typically I just start with an empty CSS sheet and define all of my values from there. But that's just me. A lot of people like to have that reset file to go back to in order to have all of those elements as a baseline level, like a standard almost. Right? Now, so we're going to create that sample page, and I'm actually going to go ahead and call that styled. And we'll go ahead and publish that. We'll open up our website again, and we should see it appear on the navigation bar. Okay, so we have our sample page, and soon in contrast, we will have our sample page style. Now, on this particular page, I want to go ahead and make this text italicized, and I want to go ahead and make this text a different color. And I want to do that within the style sheet without interfering with this guy's coding here. All right? So many times when you're to go in the CSS sheet and change one page style or one page element, you end up with all of the other pages ending up changed to the same specifications. The reason is, when you say H1 and then you take that tag within the CSS and define that it should be a color red or a color blue, it will globally change that style. And that's what's so convenient about CSS, is that it globally changes styles. But it becomes inconvenient when it's changing your styles and you just want one page styled like that. So that's where IDs and classes come into play. All right. So let's go back to our edit page. Okay, and we see that we have our sample page styled up here, and then we have all of our text. Now, to make things simple and pretty quick and straightforward here, I'm just going to change all of this text to a different color and maybe go ahead and add some different effects. So what we'll start out with is a div, and then we'll add a class. So that's all right. And we can, I like to end my div classes right off the bat just so I don't forget later and end up with an open tag. So before I even define anything, I like to go ahead and end the tag. All right. So div class, and what I want to do with this is change it to perhaps styled. We'll call it sample page styled. And this is something to note here. When you're defining a class, make sure you don't put any spaces. And to avoid confusion, often capital letters will throw you off, and you don't want to do that. So I like to keep everything lowercase and use either dashes or underscores and no spaces. All right. So now I know that I'm using the sample page and I want it styled. So I've got my div class there, and I'll go ahead and open up my theme editor. And I'm going to do this within the WordPress installation rather than pulling up an FTP client and editing a file, just for the sake of simplicity and not to confuse anyone. So we'll go ahead and open up our theme editor here within WordPress. And
You don't have to save it first?
Appearance. You do have to save it first. Go ahead and update that. So just to be clear, your theme editor is under Appearance Editor. And then the very first thing it typically pulls up is your style sheet, or your default style sheet. I like to check to make sure it doesn't have any other style sheets. Like, for instance, this one has RTL style sheet, and then there's visual editor style sheets and such forth. Now, it doesn't really matter if you edit these other style sheets, but just to keep code organized, a lot of people like to create multiple style sheets. Like for one site I designed by the name of newseniors.com. We used multiple style sheets, one for the colors, one style sheet for the font sizes, and one style sheet for block positioning and such forth. And it was a very organized environment as opposed to putting everything into one style sheet. But generally speaking, you're going to have one style sheet, generally by the name of style.css, and you're going to edit that style sheet. All right? And what's important to note as well is you want to keep your code as organized as possible. So if you've got your containers and your different divs, you're going to want to keep things like your main column in one section of the style sheet, whereas your sidebar is going to be in a completely different area of your style sheet. And you can see that the default theme for WordPress is actually pretty well organized. You've got your fonts here, and then you've got your structure here. So it's important to keep everything pretty organized. So I'm going to pick a spot that I feel comfortable with inserting this code, and it's where all of the other text is defined here. We can see A-link, color. We can see things such as block quote styles. And so I'll go ahead and add this particular element here, and we call that sample page style. So we have our class, we have sample page styled, and what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to change, I'm not going to pick any specific element like a P or an H2 or anything like that. I'm just going to globally say that everything on that page, all of the text should be the color of red. Okay.
How come it doesn't start with an A colon?
Yellow. Sorry? A colon? Oh, because A colon is actually, A is a link, so that's very specific to links as opposed to text. So if you wanted to, you could put an A in there, and that would just style your links to appear as currently yellow.
I see.
But instead of the links, we want actually all of the text to appear yellow. And a lot of times when you do set it like this, other styles, such as a link, will override that. So my links will still appear as this color, which I suspect is a blue. And my sample page style, all of the text in that page is going to appear as yellow. So, but as I was saying, you can use the word red, blue, yellow, or you can use a hex value, and you can use. It takes a little bit of study. You can look through. You can Google the word hex chart, but hexes are specific areas that almost like I like to think of them as coordinates or colors. So if I was to use like 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, that would be black, or 6 Fs, you would get white. So let me just, for the sake of simplicity, say red and update that file. Okay, now when we go back to our sample page, the styled version of it, which we did save, we should get red text. Okay. Now, we did get red text, and just to show you the difference, we go back to sample page here, the original one we copied from, and the text is still black. And that's how you can differentiate between the two, is by using specific classes for specific pages. So does that answer your question?
Hold on, I gotta unmute her. Go ahead, Masuda.
Yes, that does, but there's now another question then.
Sure.
What if I just wanted to make, like, say for whatever reason I wanted to make that first sentence red, but the rest of it black, or maybe a few words larger in size, but the rest of the post would remain the same. Basically, what I was trying to figure out was how to use that WordPress editor like a word editor where I have all that freedom to do whatever I please. Is that even possible? Or, like, I'm sure you could do it, but is it possible for me?
You know, Masuda, outside of WordPress, you might consider using Microsoft Live Writer, I believe what it's called. And it's like having Microsoft Word on your desktop. You can write your blog posts just like you would in Word. You can move pictures around. You can make text bigger. You can highlight. I mean, you have all that freedom, and you can press publish, and it will publish it directly to your blog.
Oh,
I'm gonna look up the name while we're on this call, because
cool.
for some reason I think that's wrong. But Mari Smith told me about that. She uses it all the time, and it's pretty cool. But I'll let Michael answer your question otherwise. But I'll look that up and figure out what that was.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, WYSIWYG editors are great, but many times you do have predefined style sheet values. Like if I was to go into my WYSIWYG editor, which WYSIWYG stands for what you see, what you see is what you get, and I was to pull up my different elements, and I was to select this first set of text here and try to change it to, crimson red like this and update it, many times it wouldn't apply simply because I have already defined in my CSS that it should be red or that it should be black. And that's the problem with WYSIWYG editors these days. However, I think what Dan has for you might be the best option. However, this doesn't eliminate the dilemma of having to style specific elements within the HTML so while overriding the style sheet. So what you should do is if people are apprehensive about going into the actual style sheet, you can use inline styles, which differ greatly from the HTML tags, like font size or font color. Within HTML, you can actually define CSS within your page. And I'll explain that in a second here. Just, I don't know why these are running on my little dial-up connection here. All right. anyway, let me go ahead and go into the HTML and demonstrate how that would happen. And this is interesting, actually, because what this essentially has done is the WYSIWYG editor within WordPress actually gave me, and I haven't noticed this before, when I selected this text and I selected the color and I applied it, it didn't give me an HTML tag, which is correct, and it's not using deprecated code anymore, which is exciting. So people, you do want to make sure that your WordPress installation is updated, because A, there's a lot of security holes, and WordPress is on top of the ball with keeping those patched up, but B, you can end up with better coding, and a lot of times it depends on what theme you're using. But in this particular instance, I believe that since I went into the visual side of things and I changed that color, it did apply a inline style here. You can see the span, which span is interesting. Span is kind of a null tag, so span won't do anything, as opposed to, like, say, P style or B style. You often would end up with, if P is a predefined value of bold text, then you don't want this to be bold text. You could change it to either div style or span style, and those will actually not affect your text at all. So it'll be like a null tag, and the only style that would apply is the style defined in this little equal quotation marks here. So
now your
span style color.
Your sample page styled is still there. Does this override it somehow?
Well, we'll see that in a second here.
Okay.
We'll go ahead and update this, and we'll take a look at that page. Okay, yes, and what that did was it did override it. And there are things you can do in CSS to override things. Inline styles will typically override, like in HTML, before they started deprecating the font size or font color. A lot of times when you did use those specifically on a block of text, they would override the CSS value. And so when you have an element like sample page styled, this is the parent element, and this parent element ends wherever the div tag ends. Okay.
Oh, I see
so
that now.
if I was to put that div tag in there, the rest of this text would turn black, and this would remain red. So this is a parent element. Now, when you do apply a different style, it becomes a child style. And children's styles typically override the parent style because it's more specific to that block of text. And CSS is just brilliant that way. So to further give you an example of what this inline style can do, this is there's three ways to apply CSS to a site page. You can do it by pulling in an external file, and I'll, for the sake of example, pull up the page source here and see if WordPress does the things I'm demonstrating. Okay, yes, link rel style sheet. It's pulling in the style sheet through the HTML, and it's pulling in a specific style sheet for whatever it needs. Okay, that's the first way to do it, and that's the most recommended way. And then there's also another way, and the reason that's recommended, by the way, is when you pull in an external style sheet, an external file, as opposed to having it all in one header, it keeps things very well organized. If you have thousands of lines of CSS, like many sites, like advanced sites like CNN or New Seniors or whatever, big news sites, you're going to have thousands and thousands of lines of style sheet text. And if you have all of that in your HTML, the page is going to load a lot slower. And the reason for that is it has to go through all of those different lines of text. And just a little bit of a note here. I heard it's recommended to not put spaces like line breaks, extra line breaks in your code. And this is actually not related to CSS at all. But you see here how script ends and a new div begins. While that extra line break there is supposed to actually slow down the loading time by, a millionth of a second or whatever, but it adds up over time if you have too many line breaks. That's what I'm told. So anybody can feel free to dispute that, but I like to keep as few line breaks as possible in my code, just so that the page can load as quickly as possible. But anyway, linking to an external style sheet is much more organized, simply because it's in a different location and it's not all in this file here. So you see how I can scroll down and get to where I need to be very quickly. It's very organized code, as opposed to if this style sheet here was, and you can see that it's more horizontal at this point than vertical. But if I was to have all of this code in there, I would have to scroll for ages before I was to get to the bottom, and it's just not very well organized that way. So that's what I recommend, is linking to an external style sheet. But you can also do an inline style, or you can pull in your style in the header and have that long the long list of style in there. So
what is the process for linking to the external sheet?
Well, it can be demonstrated here, and a lot of people will forget this because it's such an unusual line. But it's good to note. So if you are taking notes, then this would be the optimal time to write this down. When you do link a style sheet in, you're going to do it in your header tags. And just for the sake of example, here we've got our theme here. We've got head, and we look for the ending header tag, which is right here, and we want to pull in the style sheet before the head ends, because if you were to pull in the style sheet after the head ends, it will not apply. So the code is link. You begin your tag, and then you hit link, and then you put in space rel equals style sheet, and that tells it what kind of sheet it is, as opposed to script type JavaScript. So you want to define that it is a style sheet, and then href, much like your ahref or your image src, it's going to pull from a location. So it's link rel href, and then you pull in your CSS, and that can be whatever, style.css, preset.css, I'm crazy.css. It doesn't matter what you call it, just as long as you have it in there. And then you further define type text /CSS and media all. Okay.
Hey Glenn, Glenn had a question too, and you can answer it whenever it fits in.
Sure.
I got a question. My main thing of bringing this up was I use standard theme, and I bought the premium version of that, which I guess like Genesis or Thesis, they upgrade those every so often. So they have a custom .css file that you can modify the CSS, and then
yes,
when they upgrade, that won't be touched. How does that what am I trying to say?
Are you asking how that would apply to a theme such as this?
Well, not to a theme such as this, but how, I mean, you can pretty much do anything with CSS, like where they have the social media navigation buttons. I don't want those in that place. I can move them someplace else by using the CSS.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
So I can,
well, what's important to note is you can use CSS to, you can go as far as to use pseudo elements, and this is advanced CSS. You can use pseudo elements to even create text within a style sheet on your website. Not recommended, but you can do a lot with CSS. CSS is very flexible, and you can even tell elements to be completely removed. For example, if I wanted an element to go away, the recommended way, if I wanted this image to go away within the style sheet, and I could not find that image anywhere else, I could pull it using the CSS. But it's recommended that you go directly into your header.php file or whatever file and pull that image code as opposed to removing it with CSS. But just to give you an example, you can remove elements by using exclusively CSS.
so sort of like if you wanted your date to disappear, you didn't want your date on that. That's one thing you could remove with CSS.
Yes, you definitely could. But like I said, you probably want to go into like your post.php and find the PHP string and just pull that. But you definitely can remove that post date. And just for the sake of example, I get these questions all the time. Like people will email me, how do I remove my date? I don't want my date in there. And just for the sake of example, I'll show you how to do that with CSS, just for fun. We have our div class entry meta. Okay, so this applies to, this is our meta tag here. It's pulling our date and by admin. And let's say that I wanted to just pull that entire meta tag. I could click that div here, and I could find the entry meta. It says style.css. It says line 583, and it's entry-meta. So what I'll do is I'll go into my CSS real quickly, and I'll find entry-meta. And that's where it's defining my font family here. That's not what I'm looking for. It's defined elsewhere. Entry. Okay, here's the tag, entry-meta. We see color, and then we see font size. What you can do is you create a new line, and you type in display -none. Okay, and display none basically says, okay, if that tag is there, make it disappear. All right, so we'll save this on my cute little fast connection here. And we'll reload the page and see if that eliminated our date tag. And you can see that the date tag is now gone. Okay, so does that answer your question?
Yeah, just go ahead and it gives me a good idea of what we're talking about.
Hey,
Excellent.
Glenn, I had a question for Glenn then. If Standard or Thesis or Genesis does an update and you've changed the CSS file, does the new update overtake your changes?
No, they have a style.css file. In that, the notes say, make any changes, just copy the code and put it into custom.css. So in their CSS file, it says, read custom.css, and it will take your changes and keep those.
Oh, well, that's good then.
That way, when they do updates to their theme, you're not affected by your design.
Somebody was thinking ahead.
Yes. So when you end up upgrading that theme, it's going to replace its style.css with their updated version of the style.css. But what they will not do is update your custom style.css or whatever it's called. So that's very convenient, because I've noticed a lot of times people will send me emails saying, help, I styled up my page, and then when I updated my theme, my styles went away. Well, the reason for that is that the theme developers may not have been smart enough to throw an external style sheet in there that does not get updated, that the user can use exclusively for his or her purposes. So that's very ingenious of Thesis to do. And another theme provider called StudioPress does the same thing, I believe. So.
Yeah, that's who does Genesis.
Yeah.
Hey, I have a question for you, Michael. So we could use Firebug to go out to other websites to figure out, like, if we saw a cool element on someone else's site that we liked, we could use Firebug to figure out what it is.
Yeah, you can use Firebug to see exactly how they coded that. Now, keep in mind that copying other people's content is not legal. So like logos and such forth.
Well, sometimes I think like a cool font that I saw like in someone's headline. So I could use the Firebug to figure out what the font is, and then I could create my own little CSS section. And then I could put all the little elements that I need in there: the height, the font size, the name, and then I could create a div class with the name of my little style sheet to change the font of that element.
Yes.
All right, so that'd be pretty cool.
One thing to just continue on there, code is open source. So like CSS is open source. So you can copy other people's styles. Just try not to copy their content because that is also illegal. Are there any more questions?
There are actually. Let's see.
Okay.
No, Glenn asked his question. Masuda, did you have another question?
Yeah.
And Paul had a question, maybe. I can't tell. But go ahead, Masuda.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, okay. I have this question will sound strange to you. When I saw your WYSIWYG editor, that's when I realized why I wasn't being able to do those little changes. My one doesn't show all those options. Could that be because of the theme that I'm using? Or
I'm sorry, I didn't elaborate on that. What's very important to note in WordPress is that actually I just did full screen there. Let me get rid of that. Let me demonstrate something to you real quick. We have our edit page here, and then we have our visual, and we have our HTML. Okay, HTML is going to give us HTML tags, and for your purposes, that's not what we want. So we're going to go into visual. But you see all of these elements here, and they have, just for organization's sake, they have a portion of it that's hidden. Okay.
oh,
So all you have to do is go to the last button here, and that's actually called the kitchen sink, and you can display that by clicking that button.
oh
You
my!
have your paragraph styles. You have your underscore. You have you can change your font colors and other things.
That's
So
a plugin?
it's not a plugin. It's actually built
No.
in WordPress.
I saw it and I'd never clicked on it, and I'm usually so curious about clicking everything, but I was so afraid that I'll mess something up. Oh gosh, I feel so foolish. But thank you.
Let me show you.
Yeah, I didn't know that was there.
I felt foolish for a while as well because there was this page that I wanted to create not even 4 or 5 months ago, and you would think that at my level I wouldn't have a problem with this. I scrolled down and I could not find for the life of me where the comments were. I wanted to disable comments and there was nothing there. And so what I realized was that WordPress actually hides a lot of their things to condense the area, which is very convenient. It's very organized. But all you have to do is go to Screen Options and then click Comments, and it automatically appears down here. Or Discussion. For my purposes, I wanted to make comments go away on that page. So all I had to do was check Discussion and then check Allow Comments.
Wait, where's that at?
That's up here in Screen Options. It's going to be right where it says Howdy Administrator or Howdy Your Name. It's going to be right next to the Help button here. It says Screen Options.
Wait. Go to it again. My computer is slower than yours.
Okay. I actually highlighted it here, and I'm kind of moving my mouse around that area.
Oh.
The upper right-hand corner of the
I've never clicked that either.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Screen Options.
I just discovered it 2 days ago.
Cool.
It's very elusive. So it's awesome. I really appreciate the fact that they condense things, but it definitely confuses some of us.
Could I ask you one other? Sorry.
Sure, go for
Were
it.
you done? Okay. This is more specific, I think, to my theme. I'm using Suffusion, and it allows you to use ad hoc widgets inside a page or inside a post. But this is what, I'll read it out to you. This is what it says. I don't understand what he is even saying. He says, this is an ad hoc widget area that can be invoked with the short code, and then he gives you the code, but I have no idea where to stick that code in. Where would I put that code into?
Well, if it's a widget area, if it's an ad hoc code, I think that what you're trying to do is actually insert a widget into a certain specific area of your site. So for this instant, typically widgets appear in your sidebar. So is that where you're wanting to put it?
But the way he describes it, it seems like you can go to each page or a post and create a widget in there, not even in the sidebar, because the sidebar widgets are already there. These
Okay.
are
So does your code look something like this? I'm sorry, actually, that's not what it is. It would be more like this, whatever name equals, or equals. Is that what your ad hoc code looks like within those brackets?
somewhat. It's more like suffusion
does it look more like-
hyphen widgets ID equals 1 within quotes.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's pretty
Gotcha.
common.
Yeah, those are inline. Those are inline code.
And
elements.
where do you-
Yeah, you can.
Where do you
can throw
normally
those
put that in?
right, Yeah, typically speaking, you throw those actually right within the content here. So like if I had that, I would just put it in the code. I'd go to the HTML side first, and then I'd just go ahead and paste that in there, or put it in there,
Oh.
like that.
That's where your
Oh,
widget.
Just
okay.
paste that.
That's where your widget would show up
Where
then.
your widget would appear. So, does anybody need me to elaborate on that a little bit more, or is that pretty much clear?
Yeah, I think I got it. Oh, thank you so much. This
I think
has
Paul-
been
No problem.
very helpful.
I think Paul has a question too.
I do.
Sure. Shoot.
Excuse me, I do. A couple. One's really easy. I just noticed before that you clicked on something or did something, and you were able to sort of get a full page editor.
Yes. That's actually within the visual area. All you have to do is right next to this kitchen sink button, right to the left of it is a full screen mode. And you can actually, the shortcut for that is Alt-Shift-G.
Okay.
And so you just go ahead and click that and you get the full size, full screen editor.
Oh.
And then to make that disappear, I think you can either hit escape. Actually, no, escape doesn't work. You just click that button again or hit Alt, I think it's Alt-Shift-G. And that'll go away. Also, a lot of people miss this as well. You can actually resize your box so that you have a bigger box within this editor area. But
Oh, you just drag the corner.
Yep.
That's cool.
Great, that answers it.
All right,
And
Paul,
then,
you had another question?
I don't know if it's within the scope of what you want to discuss now, so if not, that's perfectly acceptable. If I wanted to sort of include a non-standard font, if I had a special, a font file, is there a way that I can include that on the site?
Well, it's very interesting actually. There's been several JavaScript plugins and JavaScript things that you can include in the header of your file that will allow you to link to external fonts. And one of them was created by Google, and I think it's the most reliable. But also, you'll be excited to hear that CSS, or CSS3, which is being still under development and still being applied to different browsers, so it's not fully released yet, does give you the option to link within your file directory as if you were linking to an image like, hello.jpg. You can actually link to a font file like hello.font or hello.ttf or whatever other font extension you wanted to link to. So CSS3 actually allows you to be able to show whatever font you want, which is actually an incredible step. But that's CSS3, and many browsers will not support that just yet. However, Firefox, the latest versions of Firefox, I think, support that. Safari, the latest version of Safari supports that, to my knowledge, and also Opera might as well.
So how do we do it now?
So we could, well, that is advanced CSS. It's advanced CSS3. So that's something that I was not going to cover.
Okay, that's fine.
But I mean, if you guys, if we do want to teach an advanced CSS class, we could go into that if people are more interested in the in-depth.
Is there a way to just like load up a font, like a plugin?
Well, there might be a WordPress plugin. I haven't really looked into it, but one thing I did use was the Google version of it. Let me see if I can find that. I think it was called Google Web Fonts. Google Web Fonts here. Let me go ahead and actually create a new page for this.
It's a good question, Paul.
All right, Google Web Fonts. Google Web Fonts, I'm just reading from the top here, lets you browse all fonts available on the Google Web Fonts API. And all fonts in the directory are available for use on your website under an open source license and are served by Google servers. Now, what's interesting about this is that they do have a large selection of fonts, which is amazing, and they're all open source, which means you can use as many as you want. But they might not have your specific fonts in here that you want to use, so that's the only limitation right now. So if I do find that I want to apply a certain style of font in my websites, I'll either use an image as opposed to an actual font, which does not give you the SEO benefits, but it definitely lets you use whatever font you want. Or I use this plugin. It's not actually a WordPress plugin. I believe it's JavaScript that you can plug into the top of your page and apply to different areas throughout your page. Which is also advanced and more along the lines of HTML. But then also I would look into a WordPress plugin. But the way I design these days is I look at it as whoever has the latest version of the browser is going to get the most optimal view of my website. So for instance, if I was to create a new website and I wanted to display different fonts like that, I would go ahead and display them with CSS3 or an upgraded JavaScript function, and throw that in there. And if they have Internet Explorer 6, they're not going to be able to see that. However, that's not my fault. You want your websites to look as great as possible. So whoever has the the later versions of the browser, they're going to gradually be able to see how much better your sites are. Now, what that does not mean is that your website should look like crap in Internet Explorer 6. That's not what I'm saying. You can go into Internet Explorer 6 and view your site and make sure it looks right and change your style sheet based on IE6. And you move different elements around to make sure it appears correctly. But what's important to note is that IE6 does not have nearly as many optimal features as the latest version of browsers do. So is that clear?
Excellent. Yes, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
No problem.
Hey, Mike.
Sir.
Can you go back to when you made that style sheet, when you made the text red,
Mm-hmm.
and you called it div class sample page styled? Is sample page styled, is that the style sheet, or is that like a part of a style sheet?
Well, sample page styled is exclusively what I called it. It's nothing special.
What is the name of that thing that you made, that you created?
That is called a class.
So
there's.
What are the characteristics if we want to create a class, like a new class? What do we have to include in the new class in the style sheet?
Well, what's interesting is we have classes and then we have IDs, and an ID is kind of a unique identifier to an element, as opposed to a class, which is more specific. And the way you apply that in your CSS sheet is, and the way you can differentiate between a class and an ID is a class will begin with a hashtag. So if you see with the text I've selected here, this would be an ID, and this would be a class, right? And so just remember, if you want to style something using a class, just begin the word or set of words with a period, and that's gonna define that it's a class, all right? And the way I named it, just so that people aren't confused, you don't have to. I just keep it named like this to keep it organized and know what classes I'm naming. But I mean, I could call this anything. I could call it balloons.
All right, now you have a new one called balloons. What elements need to be on this side for balloons to be a complete thing?
All I have to do is, and I'm just going to pick a random spot in the code here, and I'm going to clear all of the other code away. just to make it clear. Okay, so now I have a new element called balloons, and so all I need to do is create a new period, which would be a class, because this is not an ID, it is a class. So I'm going to start that with a period, and then all I need to do is say balloons. Okay, and then so we have that, but the problem is now that we don't have any kind of a way to identify the text. I mean, if I hit a line break here and I started defining something such as font dash size, and I said 13 pixels, now I've got a problem because I don't have anything containing that. So the style sheet does not know where it ends. So the way we tell it where that font size begins and where it ends is by creating a curly bracket. Okay. So much like if you guys are familiar with HTML, you have your beginning bracket and then you have your ending bracket. If I was to omit that ending bracket, then my code would be screwed up. So you have to have the beginning bracket or the beginning curly tag there, and then the ending curly bracket there. All right.
Okay, wait.
So going from the top, we have our dot, and that's our class, and then we have our no space between that, and we have the word balloons. Or I don't know if I actually made that plural or singular. Okay. And then you add a space. You don't actually have to add a space here, but just aesthetically, I like to add a space just for the sake of doing it. And then to keep things clean, I add a line break and a tab. I hit tab just so that there's an extra space there. And then I type in, color. All right. Now, what's important to note is that you do not have to do all the things that I do here. You can add no space here. You could keep it all in one line. And that code would work perfectly fine right there. It's just not aesthetically, it's not easy to read if you have, several different things to apply there. Like, let's say that you had, a margin, and then you had, padding. Then you had, a snazzy border. I have all of this code in here, and now when I go to balloons, I have to read this line and try to figure out where exactly my stuff is. And it's confusing with all the different characters we have to throw in there. So making them evenly line breaked through there adds a certain level of organization so that you know where your elements are and which ones to edit very quickly. And it's important to note that because when you are editing a website, you don't want to be shuffling through stuff. You want to make changes as quickly as possible.
Okay, now in balloons, if you didn't mention margin, padding, or border, would those things be governed by something else?
It would be governed by whatever parent element. So if I had balloons, if balloons was wrapped up in a class by the name of parent to balloons, and I went ahead and I said border solid, and I didn't have that border or margin in there, it would go ahead and it would take that border solid, since this is the parent element, and it would apply it to balloons. However, if I wanted to take that border away for this specific balloons element, so let's say I had balloons and I had like balloons 2-2, and I want balloons 2 to keep this solid border that's in the parent element here, but I want balloons -1 to have no border at all. So the parent says that we both should have borders. I say that balloons 1 shouldn't have a border at all. So I'm going to say border none. And so that will, since it is the child of this parent element, it's going to say that there's going to be no border around balloons 1, and there will be a border around balloons 2, simply because you did define it in the child element.
And how do you manage all these classes and so that you remember that balloons is the one that's 13 pixels, like a year from now?
Well, what's really cool is that you don't have to remember any of it. You don't have to remember that balloons 1 has 13 pixels because Firebug shows you that instantly. So we don't, and Firebug really has made a lazy coder out of me because I don't have to retain that information anymore. All I have to do is to find out, let's say I created this post a year ago, and I can't remember for the life of me whether the text is 14 pixels or 16 pixels or whatever it is. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to click the text, I'm going to right-click and I'm going to press Inspect Element. I'm going to click the little P tag here, right? And in my CSS, it should show me what size that text is. And we can see that this text, it was inherited from div content, and our text font size, our global font size, is 16 pixels. And just to be sure that I've got the right one selected, I'm going to go ahead and change it to 36 pixels. And you can see how radical of a difference that was. But you see how easy that was? All I had to do is right-click it, press Inspect Element, and then I had to go to my CSS and just, clicking that element brought up the related CSS on my sidebar. So I didn't even have to shuffle through the CSS to find it. All I had to do was select the element, and it automatically showed me.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool thing.
Yes, it's a very cool plugin. So, do we have any more questions?
There are not any more questions at the moment that are, unless somebody just happens to have one. Otherwise, we're at an hour and 6 minutes.
I know time flew by here, and I know we're learning a lot. So if we do want to come back and learn, or if you guys want to come to my website at impressui.com and shoot me an email, feel free to, anything that we covered here, if you're not clear on anything, feel free to shoot me an email, and I'd be more than happy to assist you.
Yeah, I got to set up some of my own classes. I think that was a good lesson there. Do I need to ever use ID? Can I just use class?
You can use class for pretty much anything you want. I like to use classes more than IDs because IDs are specific identifiers. But you can feel free to kind of experiment with it and figure out which class or which elements need to be an ID and which elements need to be classes. Generally speaking, you can apply a class to anything, and it'll apply. But just know that IDs will override classes depending on where you position them.
Glenn or Masuda or Paul, Glenn, do you guys have any questions?
No, I'm good. And thank you so much.
Was it helpful?
No problem.
Thank you again.
My pleasure.
Very, very helpful.
Glenn, was that helpful for you?
Yeah, it was very helpful. Maybe we all go back to what our sites and kind of try some things, and maybe we come back with Michael on another call and recover some things that we need help with then.
I second that.
Are you guys familiar with Jing?
Yes.
I think if you have a question, I think it might be worth using Jing to show what you're doing on your site and what you want it to do and what it's not doing. And then we could use little Jing videos to ask Michael, like, why the hell is it doing this?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's good thought.
And then, since Michael's helping us, that would also give him some frequently asked questions and some videos he can use then. Like, hey, here's a question that people ask. So, we can help pay him back a little bit. Yeah, Jing's free. I see that thing on the bottom, but I use the free version.
Sounds good to me.
Masuda, are you familiar with Jing?
Yes, I have Jing. Yeah, on my computer. I've used it.
It's very nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Mike. That was very helpful.
Yeah, thank you again.
Problem. Hey, it was my pleasure.
I
look forward to talking to you guys again.
I think next week's talk, somebody asked about how to get more speeches, and we're going to have both Aileen Bennett and Tommy Landstreet, both professional speakers. Tommy's he's a professional speaker, but he's kind of new to it, although he seems to be getting a lot of speeches. So we're going to have half and half. I'm going to have Aileen talk about some ideas about how to get speakers, and then I'm going to have Tom Landstreet talk about it. So, or not speakers, how to get speeches. So hopefully that will be a good call as well. So anyway, this has been freeweeklymastermind.call, weekly call. Today has been CSS and WordPress. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Have fun.
Thanks.
Thank you.